Hey everyone, it's Luke. In this video, I wanted to discuss the Sheldon coin grading scale. This is a grading scale that was established in the 1940s, and it's what's used by all of the major grading companies today. If you've been collecting for a while, a lot of what I'm about to say in this video probably isn't that new to you, but feel free to watch it and comment below if I forgot anything. However, if you're new to collecting, I'm hoping that this video is helpful for you. Being able to look at a coin and assign an accurate grade to it is an important skill to have as a collector, and it's something you'll want to get good at. So let's get started. The first thing you should know is that coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 1 being the worst grade that a coin can receive, and 70 being a near flawless coin. In addition, each grade is preceded by a 1 or 2 letter abbreviation that describes the condition of the coin. The PCGS website is actually very helpful because it has high quality images of every US coin in various grades. For example, here's a Morgan dollar with the lowest grade it could possibly receive, PO1 or PO1. This is mostly found on older coins that have been in circulation for a very long time. It takes quite a while for most of the details of a coin to get worn off to this extent. But you should know that to receive this grade, a coin still needs to have its date and its mint mark if applicable. In this grade though, nearly all of the lettering around the rim of the coin is gone. Strangely enough, some people actually collect coins in lowball grades like this. But for extremely rare coins, this also might be the only grade that's affordable. The next lowest grade is FR-2 or Fair 2. This is very similar to a coin that's graded poor, except you'll see that there's slightly more edge lettering visible. There's not too much else to say about this one. One grade above this is AG-3 or About Good 3. You can see here that most of the edge lettering starts to become visible, but it's still kind of blended into the rim. Here's a Barber half dollar in my collection that might grade at an AG-3. You can see that the obverse is pretty heavily worn, but when we turn it over to the reverse, almost all of the lettering is gone. The next highest grade is known as Good, abbreviated with a G, and a coin can grade as either a G4 or a G6. There's no such thing as a G5, and as I talk about the other grades, you'll see that many numbers are skipped. For a coin to grade as a G4, you'll see that the edge lettering needs to be entirely visible and that the rim needs to be distinct. The same thing applies to a G6, but you'll see that there's just slightly less wear. Here's a cap bust dime in my own collection that was graded a G4. Generally, this is the lowest grade you should really aim to collect, and only for coins that are pretty rare. The next highest grade is a VG-8 or Very Good 8. You can see that this coin is still pretty heavily worn, but that there is quite a bit more detail in the hair on the obverse and the feathers on the eagle on the reverse. There actually are specific grading standards for all of the US coins that have been minted, with specific details to look at for each grade. I'll be sure to discuss some of these resources at the end of the video that I found helpful when I started collecting. One grade higher than a VG-8 is a VG-10, and you can see here, comparing this coin with the previous, how certain details just begin to pop out. The next highest grade is abbreviated with an F and is known as Fine. At this grade, you can see about half of the detail is worn flat, and a coin might grade as either an F12 or an F15. There are no grades in between. The next highest grade jumps all the way up to a VF20, where VF stands for Very Fine. In this grade, you can see that most of the larger details are present, but pretty much all of the finer details have been worn away. And a coin given a VF grade can actually range anywhere from a VF20 to a VF35. It's important to realize though that here, the grades are only increased by increments of 5. So VF20, VF25, VF30, and VF35 are the only grades that actually exist. And you can see that there actually is quite a big difference between a VF20 and a VF35. Here's a Flying Eagle cent in my own collection that was graded a VF25. You can see that it has a pretty nice amount of detail still present. And here I have a Seated Liberty half dollar that was graded a VF30. And you can see that for a pretty large coin like this, This is actually a very collectible grade. After VF comes XF, which stands for extremely fine, and a coin can either grade as an XF40 or an XF45. In these grades, you can see that it's really just the higher details that have a large amount of wear, whereas the details lower on the coin only have very slight wear. This is a really collectible grade, and certain coins are actually very difficult to find in this grade. Unfortunately, I don't currently have any coins with this grade in my collection. The next set of grades are abbreviated with the letters AU, meaning about uncirculated. This is a coin that has such a small amount of wear that means it must have only briefly been in circulation. Only the highest points on the coin will show any signs of wear, and there might even be a lot of the original mint luster present. On the Morgan dollar, for example, some of the high points might be the cheek, certain areas on the hair, or the tips of the wings on the reverse. An AU coin can be graded as either an AU50, an AU53, an AU55, or an AU58. A coin that's graded an AU58 is often a really nice looking coin, but it just has the slightest bit of friction on the high points. You might even be convinced that a coin like this is uncirculated, and you might have to move the coin around in the light to see how the light shines differently on the high points that are worn. Here I have a Walking Liberty half dollar in my own collection that was graded in AU58, and this is a beautiful coin that really doesn't even look like it's circulated until you stare at the high points of the coin. You can see that it's got nearly the full mint luster present, but that there is a bit of dullness on the high points of the coin. It might even be hard to pick this up on video. Here I have a V nickel that was also graded in AU58. And it's another beautiful coin, but unfortunately it just has the slightest evidence of wear. Some people even buy coins graded AU58 and send them in for regrading, hoping that they'll cross over into mint state or an uncirculated grade. This is because the grading can start to get a little bit subjective at this level. This finally brings us to grades 60 through 70, which are abbreviated by MS or mint state. These coins are truly uncirculated and have no evidence of wear whatsoever. Every number from 60 to 70 is actually represented, so there are actually 11 mint state grades. The higher mint state grades are incredibly rare, and this is also where it can get extremely subjective. And an increase in the mint state grade of a coin by even just one grade can potentially increase the value of a coin by thousands of dollars. As a collector, it'll take you years or potentially even decades until you get good at grading mint state coins, so pay close attention here. When grading a mint state coin, you'll want to pay attention to any marks on the coin, as well as the coin's luster and even its strike. For example, coins struck later on the same die will often have a weaker strike, making it more difficult for them to grade higher. A weak strike might even be common with a certain year of a certain coin. So looking at the different mint state grades, anything between an MS70 and an MS62 is generally below average for an uncirculated coin. In fact, an about uncirculated coin might even look better than a coin in one of these grades. This is because in these grades, a coin might have many scratches or bag marks, be weakly struck, or have an unattractive luster. Take a look at how scratched up this MS60 Morgan dollar is, and now compare that to the same coin graded in AU58. Here's a piece dollar in my own collection that was graded in MS61. You can see that this coin has some pretty heavy bag marks on prominent areas of the coin, such as the neck and the face. In addition, the strike of the coin is a bit weaker than average. A coin graded MS63 is pretty much an average uncirculated grade. In a bag of uncirculated coins straight from the mint, it's likely that a lot of coins would grade in MS63. These coins will have an average or slightly below average strike with a moderate amount of marks throughout. Slightly above average is a coin graded MS64. This coin is required to have an average or slightly above average strike with even less marks throughout. In addition, there shouldn't be any severe marks on prominent areas of the coin. Here's an MS64 Morgan dollar from my own collection. You can see that this is definitely an above average coin. A coin graded in MS65 is even nicer, and it must have an above average strike with even fewer marks and hairline scratches. A heavy amount of marks on prominent areas of the coin will make it ineligible for this grade. You can see also that the fields around the designs of the coin are much clearer and have fewer scratches present. In a bag full of uncirculated coins from the mint, coins grading MS65 or above will actually be somewhat rare. Here's another Morgan dollar from my collection that was graded in MS65. Hopefully you can see the difference between this coin and the previous coin. Morgan dollars above this grade get pretty expensive. Even nicer is a coin graded MS66. There's not too much differentiation here other than the fact that a coin in this grade must be well struck and that it has even fewer marks. Even nicer is a coin graded MS67, and at this grade, especially on smaller coins, you might struggle to find any significant marks without magnification. In a bag full of uncirculated coins, this grade is exceedingly rare, and for older coins, there might not even be any graded this high. Here's a Buffalo nickel in my collection that's graded in MS67. This isn't really a valuable coin in lower grades, but because of the rarity of this grade, this coin is actually very valuable. There are only a small number of coins that have actually obtained this grade, and none are graded higher. Coins graded MS68 to MS70 are incredibly rare, and usually these grades are only found on more modern coins. To receive these grades, a coin needs to have an exceptional strike and have only the most minor flaws. You'll probably need to really look at the coin to find where the imperfection is that lowers its grade. And MS70 is a grade that's virtually impossible to receive. You'll really only find that grade on certain coins that were specially handled during manufacturing to ensure that there were no surface imperfections. So that's the Sheldon coin grading scale, all the way from PO1 to mint state 70. This gives collectors a uniform way to describe the condition of a coin, and therefore its value. There are a couple of other details you should know. For example, you probably noticed that all of the mint state grades said MS/PR. PR is the grading designation used for proof coins. Because proof coins aren't intended for circulation, you'll almost always find them graded in the high 60s. You'll really only find them in grades lower than that if they were improperly handled by collectors. For example, here's an Eisenhower dollar from my collection graded a proof 68. You can see that this coin has almost no visible imperfections, although it does have some toning which shouldn't detract from the grade. A 68 is an incredibly rare grade for a mint state coin, but for a proof coin, it's pretty common. Here's a proof silver eagle from my collection, but this one was graded a proof 70. That means that this is essentially a perfect coin. You'll really never see a mint state 70 coin, but a proof 70 coin isn't incredibly rare. One thing you should also be aware of is that both mint state and proof coins can receive a plus grade. For example, a coin might be graded as mint state 65 plus. This is a coin that grades slightly higher than a mint state 65, but still slightly lower than a mint state 66. As I mentioned before, if a coin's grade is increased by even one grade, the value of that coin can increase dramatically. So plus grades were added to give a little bit more distinction. The plus designation is sometimes even found on higher grade circulated coins. One other type of grade you should be aware of is a details grade. This is given when a coin is tampered with or undergoes unnatural types of wear. For example, here's a large cent in my collection that received a VF details grade due to environmental damage. Environmental damage is very common on a lot of old copper coins, so they need to be distinguished from coins without corrosion. Here's a Buffalo nickel in my collection that received an AU details grade. If you look carefully, you can see that there's a large scratch that goes all the way across the head on the obverse. Because this scratch really detracts from the coin and is much larger than a typical mark you'd normally find, it can't receive a flat AU grade and is instead given the details designation. This here is another common reason for a details grade. This coin was graded VF details because PCGS is saying it was cleaned. Normally, a cleaned coin will look very monotone and won't have any of the natural toning that you would expect from a coin of that age. A lot of silver coins will be kind of a pure white color with no real variation, and a lot of copper coins will be a dull orange color, also with no variation. So that's everything you need to know in order to understand the Sheldon coin grading scale. As I mentioned before, it'll take years until you get really good at grading coins, but with enough practice, it'll come easy to you. I also mentioned that there are some books that go into greater detail on how to grade specific coins. For example, it might be helpful to purchase a book on the official grading standards of the American Numismatic Association. This book has detailed images for specific coins showing where the high points are located and the details to look at for specific grades. Even the Red Book or Blue Book price guides offer some information in this area. If you're interested, I'll be sure to link all of these in the description below. One of the best resources, however, is PCGS PhotoGrade, which shows images of specific coins in every grade possible, so you can just scroll between the different grades and try to find the one that matches yours most closely. This is available in their CoinFacts app, which also links directly to their price guide. So hopefully this overview was helpful for you, especially if you're new to collecting. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.